Decluttering can be a really daunting task, but what if you could learn from someone who's been there? Today, we're going to dig into the top things I wish I knew when I started my declutter journey. I'm uncovering it all. Number one, I didn't understand the difference between true clutter and expected mess. And like so many of my students have experienced throughout the years, raise your hand if this is you too. You would spend hours putting things back where they belong, cleaning up your kitchen. You'd have these perfectly clean counters at the end, and then your kids would wake up from their nap, or your partner would come home and stuff would fill back up on your perfectly clean counters, and you almost blew a gasket. It's so frustrating. And it kind of felt like an exercise in futility. What is the point of trying to keep up with all the stuff if it's just gonna come back there minutes or hours later? It's a really frustrating spot to be. And I think the bigger problem here is for a lot of us, seeing that constant mess, we also tend to equate mess to inadequacy. And I used to feel like I'm a terrible mom, a terrible wife, a terrible caregiver, homemaker, whatever it is, and I'd go into this failure, shame, resentment cycle. That is a really tough cycle to stay in. And it made me not even want to try. But you have to remember that expected mess, what you were doing when you're putting things away and tidying up your home, very different than decluttering, is expected mess is a part of life. I don't care if you're me, Marie Kondo, the minimalist, everyone's home gets messy. And so also tied into the difference between expected mess and clutter, sometimes we just need to lower our expectation and stop striving for perfection, right? Our countertops are never gonna stay perfectly clean. And I have lots of videos on different strategies and things that you can do to help combat expected mess. Now, clutter, on the other hand, is the excess, the disorganized excess that is chaos, which sometimes blends in with the expected mess. The solution for clutter isn't to put it away, isn't to organize it. Remember that clutter is chaos. Let it go. And once I really started to understand, hey, it's normal for my house to get messy every day, it was such a breath of fresh air. It was so liberating to know, hey, this is normal. This happens to everyone. And I was able to continue decluttering, and it didn't feel like such an exercise in futility. Thinking a checklist or a strategy or a method was going to be my end all be all. It was like the thing I was striving for. If only I had this one strategy, then and only then would I be able to clean my home and declutter it perfectly. But the reality is there are a million things that are so much more important than strategy, like consistency, habit forming, resiliency, discipline. You have to step out of scarcity and into abundance. That's really going to help you on your declutter journey. Getting to the roots of our clutter is so important. And I was like hiding under a rock about the roots of my clutter for years. So basically what I was doing is I was decluttering and recluttering at the same time because I wasn't focusing on the reasons it was coming in, the influx of stuff. And a big part of that problem was yours truly. I had a bit of a shopping problem. So if you are tired of taking one step forward, 10 steps back in your declutter journey, and it's exhausting, chances are you need to address the roots of the clutter. So checklists, strategies, methods, don't get me wrong, they are great, but typically they only help at surface level. With clutter, we always need to dig deeper, figuratively and literally. Another huge mistake, this all or nothing mentality, which ties into these perfectionistic tendencies I massively struggled with. Put a yes in the comments if you've ever thought these thoughts when it comes to decluttering. I'll start when I feel ready. But do we ever feel ready? No, we procrastinate. If I don't do it perfectly, then it's not worth it. Or maybe you just have this kind of anxiety or feel this pressure from yourself, like I have to get it all done right now. This is one of the most important mindsets you have to shift if you want to truly see success when it comes to decluttering, because decluttering is a lifelong journey. It truly is. Just like we don't exercise one time at the gym and then all of a sudden we're like super buff. Same thing with decluttering. There's always going to be an inflow of things. Our lifestyle changes, our needs changes, and right along with that, so does the stuff in our home. So you have to literally flex this muscle, and that muscle is this: progress over perfection. I want you to constantly remind yourself of that as you begin and continue on your declutter journey. Fantasy self versus your actual self. Francine J has written a few different books, and in one of them, she talks about this concept of a fantasy version of yourself. And sometimes we either purchase things or we keep things that we know we don't use that are truly clutter, but they align with this fantasy version of ourselves. Maybe that's clothing. Maybe the fantasy version of yourself wears bohemian long dresses on a day-to-day basis. So you've purchased those things, and every time you go to declutter your closet, you're like, oh, but maybe I'll wear that next week or one day. The reality is your actual self isn't a bohemian dresser. You wear jeans and a t-shirt, right? That's me. I'm like sweatshirt, jeans, I'm good to go. So I had to drop this idea of this fantasy version of myself, and it really impacted so many different categories of things within my home. Clothes, dishes, kitchen towels, little things that I kept. And I get it. It can be really hard to let go of things that kind of represent this idealistic version of ourselves, but it can also be so liberating to let go of those same things, declutter them, donate them, sell them, whatever that looks like, and allow us to step into a more authentic, genuine version of ourselves. Like the person you are today, that's a beautiful thing. So you can honor who you are by letting go of that stuff that represents who you aren't. This reminds me of after I became a mom and I had 2 young sons, for whatever reason, I ended up believing that a good mom did arts and crafts with her kids. Now, my actual self doesn't like to do arts and crafts. I never have, but my fantasy version of myself, my Pinterest mom version of myself, would gleefully and excitedly do arts and crafts. So guess what I did? I went to Michael's, I went to Hobby Lobby, I spent hundreds of dollars, I got all the things, the hot glue gun, the paints, the finger paints, the canvases, all the stuff. But guess what? I don't like doing that stuff, so I never did it. And so time and time again, I would come back to this box in my garage when I was decluttering it, filled with arts and crafts. And for years, I couldn't allow myself to let it go. And I couldn't really understand why. Obviously, it was clearly clutter, all of these things. But once I just dug a little bit deeper and brought some awareness into the situation, it's because at some point along my journey of becoming a mom, I had some subconscious belief pop into my head that said, in order to be a good mom, you need to do arts and crafts with your kids. I never once was told that by anyone. I didn't read a blog that said that. I didn't read it in a Good Mom Handbook on page 39, paragraph 2, right? Never read that, but it was a belief I had, and that was impacting not only the stuff I purchased and brought into my home, but the stuff I was keeping. I made a decision in that moment, and I said, guess what? I'm still an amazing mom, even though I don't do arts and crafts with my kids. That's all it took. I literally just grabbed the whole bin, took it to the donation center, and felt so amazing afterwards. Maybe you too have some things you've struggled to let go of, and you're like, oh, this is why. It's because I was really tied to this fantasy version of myself. So you can just ask yourself very objectively, without judgment, why am I so attached to this fantasy version of myself? Like me, likely you have some stories you just need to put to rest and move on from. And again, the freedom you get in letting go of those things that don't represent you because you're amazing the way you are, it's priceless. Organizing your clutter. I was so guilty of this. In fact, for the first few years that I was decluttering, or so I thought, I was actually just organizing. I wasn't letting anything go. Just because you go to Target and spend hundreds of dollars on cute matching bins doesn't mean you're going to solve your clutter problem. In fact, I know it won't solve your clutter problem because I did that. I was focusing on all organization. Organize your expected mess, the stuff you are keeping, absolutely, but stop organizing your clutter. Please, 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 please. Keeping things because of their potential use. Every single one of us could argue that every single thing in our homes has potential use. This kept me so stuck. I held on to so many boxes, trinkets, gadgets, everything, clothing, you name it, all because of its potential usefulness. So what I had to do, and it took me years to do it, is understand that oftentimes this is driven by scarcity. The root of this is scarcity. It is for a lot of us, right? This anxiety or fear. What if I need this in the future? And so we try to out-negotiate the declutter process by going, well, it could be potentially useful. I'm going to hang on to it instead. Instead, I want you to step out of scarcity one step at a time. And you can do that by instead saying, if this were useful, I would be using it right now. That's it. That's it. That's all you have to say. And again, sometimes it's these little statements and these little reminders you can post on Post-it notes to help combat some of these thoughts that otherwise keep you stuck. This is a big one for me, and I know it's really going to help you too. And again, while going from scarcity to an abundance mindset isn't an overnight switch and isn't going to happen with, one affirmation or positive statement, this is a great place to start. Decluttering is a process, so just take it one step at a time. Avoid these common mistakes that I've made, and I promise you, you will massively hit the gas pedal on your declutter progress. But maybe you're ready to just take on one room. Click the video on your screen now to learn how you can declutter your kitchen just in time for some spring cleaning.